The Happy Warrior Podcast, conservative commentary on the news of the day from a more positive perspective.
Hello everyone, this is the Happy Warrior Podcast with your host Peter Pischke, also sometimes known as Happy Warrior Pete. It's nice to be here with you today. I apologize for getting this recording out so late. My health hasn't been great. I've just been struggling with a lot of chronic pain issues again, as always it seems. And just weather not cooperating and all host of things. I mean, even when I sat down to record this evening, a car in front of my house decided to have a crash. And they had a couple other cars get out, try to help them with the wheel. They're still parked out there right now. I don't know what's wrong with the car. A couple people have tried to help them now, so I think they're waiting on a tow. Otherwise, I'd offer my expertise, except I know very little about cars. So this episode may or may not be the full 90 minutes that I like to try it to be. So if it gets there, it gets there. And if it doesn't, it doesn't. But I hope to get out the things that I feel that need to be said. And I hope that I can enlighten and inform and educate you upon some of the issues and the underlying philosophies are going on in our world right now. A big push when I was reflecting on what I wanted to talk about in this week's episode came with all that dumb stuff with the Gillete commercial that everyone and their dog is talking about. I don't want to totally rehash on it because everyone now has seen the commercial and has seen 2 or 3 or 5 or 10 takes on the commercial. We will as have yet to see if it is effective. Sometimes these very lefty, politically correct ads work, and sometimes they don't. With the Nike Colin Kaepernick stuff, it worked. So it does sometimes work, but, there are other times it's failed. I think Procter & Gamble, they tried in 2017 with a similar ad for a product for women, and it was very political and overt, and it didn't do very well. So it can go either way. We, as of yet to see it, I think this is something we're going to see more of. If the Gillette ad doesn't take it, maybe even in spite of it tanking, I think we will see more of this political pandering. The idea behind the political pandering is pretty simple. It isn't just the old any publicity is good publicity. It's also let's make people use our product more by making it a polarized product. So while Gillette has to compete with many different brands of razors, a lot of people point out they're great $10 a month or less, like Harry's or Dollar Shave Club. Gillette, to make people polarized and want to protect the brand and buy the brand, they're hoping that people on the left will stand up and buy the brand if they can make it polarized. This is a gamble because, again, you don't know if the gamble will pay off. It could really screw them up big time if this doesn't really bring new people to buy the product, and you just turned off a whole lot of people on the right as well. So we'll see. I don't like it because it's more culture war garbage. I'm so tired of this culture war. I really, really am. I've been tired of the culture war for a long time. I'm one of those people that saw The Last Jedi and it was just an awful movie and recognized that it was a full front in the culture war. And I was like, why do we have to bring the culture war to Star Wars? Is that really necessary? But apparently it was. And I could go on and on about that particular subject, but I want to narrow in on the Gillette ad and the underlying philosophy behind it, which is that this term, you probably have heard it and seen it everywhere. It was, in fact, a major plot point in the Ghostbusters 2016 plot line. Oh, that was an awful movie, too. Yes, that is the word, toxic masculinity. Toxic masculinity. And a whole pieces of our society, people in academia, people in psychology, people in industry have come out in the culture war against this idea that they have framed as toxic masculinity. And as a conservative, you can probably guess where I'd go, and I think to some extent you'd be right. Yes, I am bothered by this, but not exactly why. See, people who want to frame this is that conservatives have a problem with this because it puts down men, and men have equal worth in society as women. And that's kind of just like a flat look at it, but it's not accurate. There's more to it. Masculinity, men, have a value. They really do. Men have a value. Men acting with chivalry, with grace, men using their strength to defend others. This is masculinity as a positive in society. It's a positive element in society. We talk about environmentalism. If you take a species out of an ecosystem where you majorly alter an organism or in a ecosystem, so like we're in the rainforest, we chop all the rainforest trees down, right? They say we have no homes. That causes everything to tilt, become unbalanced, and you have all kinds of problems. Or like you get rid of the honeybee, or you could numerous examples that environmentalists like to go with. Well, our society is an ecosystem as well. Families are micro ecosystems. They are a microcosm of a society, and they rely upon men acting well. Now, I agree that you can take the ad as, well, this is just us wanting to be positive. This is just us wanting men to be better. But they didn't go it from a positive angle. You can go half glass full, half glass empty. This was the half glass empty approach to that. And this goes back, though. This idea about toxic masculinity goes back all the way back to Rousseau and even earlier. It's something we refer to as the blank slate fallacy. The blank slate fallacy, which pops up every couple of decades. Someone new wants to go back to this idea and think we can reorganize society. We can change the fundamental nature of humanity. We can strain that timber of humanity, as Jonah Goldberg likes to say. And it's because of the blank slate fallacy. The blank slate fallacy is simply this. People are born with no software. They are just a person. You can program them with the right teaching and raising to be anything you want them to be. That there is no innate characteristics of a man, no innate characteristics of a woman, no innate characteristics of a child, no innate characteristics of a human being. Anyone that's had kids knows this is complete and utter garbage. You know that kids come with their own feelings and beliefs, and you have to teach them and grow them and raise them and turn them into adult human beings that are civilized. Okay, my niece, Lena, who I love very much, likes to scream during dinner time. Now, if we never correct that behavior, she's going to scream during dinner time and be an awful adult to live with. That's just something she came with and she developed on her own. So the blank slate fallacy is something that pops up very frequently, especially in Rousseauian philosophy. Rousseau was a French philosopher who believed that, everywhere man is in chains. And it was this idea that truly modernity is slavery, and that we're only truly happy when we're at our basic animal nature in the wild. That was Rousseau. And then the Marx and Hegel, they had all kinds of crazy ideas. But they also bought in that you could organize society, because the organized society idea comes from the blank slate fallacy. Okay? The blank slate fallacy just doesn't hold water. You can look at any animal. They just come with a certain temperament. They come with certain characteristics and behaviors that are more likely to happen because of their breed or nature. You can't get around that. That's just science. The toxic masculinity is that men, so there's either two ways you could take this, right? Either one, men come toxic predisposed. Men just come toxic no matter what you do. They just come toxic predisposed. Or two, men only are toxic because they are raised to be toxic. And the Gillete ad, if I had to take a guess, is coming from that angle. This isn't new. I mean, even last year, Vice had an article that said all masculinity is toxic and how all the world's problems is due to the toxicity of man. And this isn't an uncommon thing. This is, on the left these days, it's very popular to go to. And I'm sad for that, because I think that the left, most of all, needs to relearn the value of men. I just got done watching The Pacific and Band of Brothers. They're World War II TV shows made by HBO in the early and mid-O's. Beautiful. That is the definition of good masculinity. Men that as brethren, they stand for their beliefs. They stand to fight for freedom. They put their lives on the line for the sake of others. Masculinity. When our soldiers defend our freedoms, more often than not, especially if they're infantry, they're men. And doing this is a sign of positive masculinity. So there is positive masculinity. Now, does that mean there's negative masculinity? Yes. Yes, there most certainly is. If you've met people that, are just toxic, that are cruel, that are bullies, and that's only part of it. But I also think toxic masculinity is men that are never shown how to channel that energy. As a man, when you're a boy, you become a man, you have to learn many things. You have to learn about how to channel your energy. When and when you cannot be angry. When and when you cannot use force. When is okay when I attack someone and I punch someone. Well, you can attack an enemy that comes at you, but you cannot punch your sister, as much as she may make you feel that way at the time. And boys often have these feelings of aggression, and they have to be taught where to put that aggression towards. Being a man is a great thing for society. It really is. Now, I don't think a man or a woman are better than each other, because you need food and water. Well, a healthy society needs men and women. Okay? You can't just go with one and expect a positive outcome. And I have all kinds of stats I'd like to go into this. It's fascinating to me. Just fascinating how crazy this has become. I think what made me want to talk about this more was with the A.P.A, the American Psychological Association, decided to, I don't know a lot about the history of the American Psychological Association. I mean, I remember reading about it some, but I couldn't tell you off the top of my head anything that I read. But they decided to jump into the culture war debate, full frontal, and it's kind of scary, because people that subscribe to this, psychologists, and that gain their learning material from the American Psychological Association, that's kind of a dangerous thing. But it's a Marxist feature that they believe that the reason men are broken is because of masculinity. And so to fix men, you have to fix their toxic masculinity. And the way to do that is to have them act like, well, essentially like women, right? So there are things like bigotry. Yes, it's good to stop bigotry, and it's good to not have them lead in harassment, not to lead in homophobia. Though I think that's a problem that's it's something that comes from masculinity unchallenged and ungrown. I think there's places where I think they're right, but fundamentally I think they're way wrong, because the way they basically put it is you have to make a man embrace feminine values. And there are certain values in society that are more masculine, some that are more feminine. I think nurture is often a very feminine value. But protection is a very masculine value, and people need some of each, not only in their family, but each person. But wholesale to say that a man is broken because he doesn't exhibit the exact same behavior as a woman is ridiculous, and it's really going to screw up some men who need help now more than ever. I think why this has gained so much traction is because in the United States, single motherhood has never been stronger. I think we have more adolescents and young men without a father figure in their life than ever before. I think that there are men that don't know how to function, that don't know how to establish a family, that don't know how to hold down a job, that don't know how to stand up for good things and stand against bad things. I think that is a problem. And one of the big caveats I have with this is that we just have to pretend that men are the abusers of society and women are the victims. And that's an old idea. To some extent, it's true. Men are physically stronger, on average. A man, if you have people and you say you have to pass this physical exam, you want to be a firefighter, many more men are going to be able to pass than women. And of course, there are many men that won't pass. That'd probably be me. Physically, I'm a weakling. But it's just, that's the way we're biologically built. So in that way, that men do have an advantage over women, but women have an advantage is that women tend to use societal and behavioral abuse more often than men. I have, there's this fantastic essay by Megan Daum in the long-form magazine Medium. It's called #MeToo will not survive unless we recognize toxic femininity. And I'll just read a little bit from it. It's a good read. I recommend that everyone read it. It'll make you think about this. I'll just jump here in the beginning. He says, raise your hand if you ever behaved badly and blamed it on your period. So I can't speak to that. But raise your hand if you ever act helpless in the face of an unpleasant, if not physically demanding task like dealing with a wild animal that's gone inside the house. This is, by the way, in German, is a concept called a Weltanschauung. And Weltanschauung is when you act incompetent on purpose and you know you're acting incompetent and you enjoy it. So that's Weltanschauung. When the woman says, "Oh, a spider," and she kind of enjoys it, and she decides she just wants someone else to deal with it. There you go, Weltanschauung. Raise your hand if you ever coerced a man into sex, even though he didn't really want it. Raise your hand if you ever thought you were at liberty to do coercing men, because men always want it, they should feel lucky anytime they get it. Raise your hand if you ever threatened to harm yourself if a man breaks up with you or doesn't want to see you anymore. Raise your hand if you've been physically abusive with a male partner, knowing you will unlikely to face any legal consequences. Raise your hand if you lied about being on birth control or faked a pregnancy. Raise your hand if you ever manipulated divorce or child custody dispute in your favor by falsely insinuating that man has been abusive toward you or your child. That last one, I do know it happens, and I would say that's less about toxic femininity than it is about the really screwed up American family court system, where it incentivizes divorcees to make up abuse about each other. That's a dreadful, terrible thing. And I'll just read this next paragraph. I'll stop there for now. In this hypothetical gathering of every woman I've ever known or encountered, I'm imagining a football stadium at decent capacity. I'm certain there's not a single one of those questions that, if answered honestly, wouldn't send some hands into the air, including my own. I know I'm guilty on the pest control front. I don't want to think too hard about some of the others. And it's a fantastic essay. It was this one, and then an essay by McAllister, A.J. McAllister. No, was it J.D. McAllister? Whatever. I can't think of the name right now. McAllister, something or other. That both went into, like, look, here are the stats about men and women. Here are the stats when women behave badly. If we feel we have to confront men over their bad behavior, well, we have to be able to confront when women screw up and they make things worse. And there are a bunch of ways women do make things worse. Even Time had to admit in opinion piece called "The Surprising Truth About Women and Violence." So I'll go to a paragraph, and it says, there is little dispute that men commit far more violent acts than women. According to FBI data on the crime, they account for 90% of known murders. Study published, the men account for nearly 80%. But whatever explains the higher levels of male violence, biology, culture, both, the indisputable fact is that it's directed primarily at other males. In 2010, men were the victim in almost 4 out of 5 homicides and 2/3 of robberies and non-domestic aggravated assaults. Family and intimate relationships, the one area feminists often identify as a key battleground in the war on women, are also an area in which women are most likely to be violent. Not just in response to male aggression, but more towards children, elders, family relatives, partners, and non-violent men, according to a study published in the Journal of Family Violence. And there are loads of studies and surveys that show that women often can be just as abusive as men in a domestic situation. There's even a facet with I hate that Lindsay Lohan movie, but there's even a syndrome called Mean Girls syndrome that there are studies about it, how girls use relational aggression to hurt people, where they tell rumors, where they make someone's life a living hell because rumor mongering is only one, or they're very, passive aggressive, and that very passive aggressive way some mean women are. And you've all known at least one or two that were like this. And this is just one way that men typically aren't. There are men that go into relational aggressiveness, but it tends more often to be women. And look, we just can't get away around it. And even when it comes to the most horrific of crimes, which is sexual assault of men of anyone but children. And this is I've one from Thought Catalog: 10 Ways Female Sexual Predators Assault Men and Boys. And it'll freak you out. 2010 CDC study revealed that men and women were being made to penetrate in nearly identical levels. Bureau of Justice stats from 2013 reveal that according to the FBI's new definition of rape and sexual violence, a shocking 38% of victims are male, and that's not even referring to like men on men, that's women on men. In 2013, a study published in the JAMA Pediatrics claimed that when sexual violence is defined similarly to how the famous campus study framed it, i.e. forced kissing and the like, an astounding 52% of males and 48% of females over age 18 had committed sexual violence at least once in their lives. In 2000, and this one freaks me out. And if you have experience inside the juvenile system, particularly the juvenile system. I don't know what I was saying. I was trying to say prison system, and then I got okay. If you've had experience in the American juvenile system, this is a shocking common thing. A 2008-2009 CDC report revealed that American juvenile facilities, and this messes me up, more than 95% of staff members who molested incarcerated minors were females. We even have a study from 1988 that claims that 62% of men had experienced unwanted sexual intercourse in their lives as compared to 46.3% of women. And the person that wrote this article says, look, if you don't like these statistics, don't bark at me. Bark at the U.S. government and the Journal of the American Medical Association. And it gets into pretty big detail. Some of the list talks about gang rape, how gang rape can be a thing by women while they rape people when they're unconscious or asleep. Gunpoint, knife point, that's snake point. That's a South African thing, I guess. I don't know. I don't want to read too much into it, guys. Incest, statutory rape, false imprisonment, date rape, drugs. Okay, look. Here's the thing. The blank slate fallacy kind of gives this a wedge, is that, well, all things being equal, and we can just train people whoever they want to be. And we think the men are the problem. Then women get off scot-free. Women are the angels. They're fine. Men are the big problems. And this is the premise behind the Gillete ad, behind the A.P.A. Toxic masculinity push. It's behind all of this, is that men are bad, women are good. I know that sounds like a MAGA right-wing fantasy. I got it. Okay. I got it. But here's the truth. The statistics say women commit just as awful things as men. And you know why? It's not a masculinity versus femininity thing. I think it's a humanity thing. Yes, masculinity unchanneled can lead men to make really stupid decisions. I agree. But at some extent also, femininity unchanneled and just humanity unchanneled leads women and men to commit horrible, horrible acts of violence and aggression and just evil, evil stuff. And I don't know how you can make this push in the culture war and you say one side's bad, the other side's good. No nuance is allowed. And how people are going to come out the better for this. It's still said often. It's said that if a man, if they were raped, there's often a problem in our society where they say, well, the man he really wanted it. And you don't think this is you. Well, think about the story. If you have a man who has underage sex, he's a male teacher, is underage sex with a high school or middle school female. You want to put that guy in prison for the rest of your life. If you're a man and that's your daughter, you want to kill him. Or you'd have to be stopped from killing him. Now, flip that. A woman, a high school teacher, is a female. She has relations with a boy in high school or middle school. Or, Do you think she's going to receive as harsh a punishment? No. It's obvious. People will say, well, really, he wanted it. Really, it's just this exciting fantasy, yada, yada, yada. It can really mess people up. Rape is wrong no matter who's doing it. It just drives me crazy. All this culture war garbage drives me crazy because it blinds us to what's really going on. That men and women can be bad because humanity can be bad. Yes, there are innate characteristics. Unchanneled and untaken care of can lead us to make bad choices. It can hurt people. But also our base software, our base hardware. You have Windows 10, whatever Windows comes on your computer. Well, the human OS that's on the human computer, the human person, when they come to this world, if it doesn't get adjusted, humans can do really stupid things to each other and ruin a heck of a lot of lives. And that is what frustrates me about all of this. And to the people on the right that want to make this a culture war, men versus women, and I don't have time for that either. I don't have time for that either. I want truth and honesty, not one side on the culture war over the other. I think that's something the MAGA crowd sometimes gets wrong. But I think they do more good than harm, and I think those energies the MAGA crowd have can be channeled towards freedom and liberty. You know, they can be channeled towards good, but unfortunately, too often it's not. All right, well, you got my take. Those are my thoughts. I want to read an essay that was quite moving, and I'll get to that in a second. But first, I want to play 30 seconds, catch your breath, read my 2 things I have for you. Then we'll move to the next subject, and we'll go from there. This is the Happy Warrior program with Happy Warrior Pete. Thank you for listening. Hey, I'm back. You know, one of the reasons I'm hurting so much, besides the weather here in my home state of South Dakota, is that I had my wonderful Lena, my niece Lena, and she brought along with her entourage her mom and dad, which are my brother James and his wife, Jerica. And it was James's birthday, and so we had a small time, 24-hour period where we got to hang out at my house. We watched Solo, the Star Wars movie. I played in Rough House with Lena as best I could. Even though it hurt me, I felt it was important to do so. Okay, and this is one of the issues I have. One of the things about my disability, disease, whatever you want to call it, is that it makes touching very hard. There are many days where I can't even have someone touch my shoulder. If I don't give them permission, I don't see the hand coming. If they don't touch it lightly, they can leave me pain. It's awful. It is awful. It is a very hard existence, especially lately. It feels very dark. But it felt important to me to give that time and energy to Lena. One, because I love her and I want to see her happy. But two, because science shows that it is very important for children and their proper development that they get rough housing time with dad and their male relatives. And there are many studies that show it. I first became aware of this phenomenon from the Coddling of the American Mind by Jonathan Haidt, Greg Lukianoff. I've talked about that book a bunch of times now. It's an amazing book. It covers a lot of things. It's a very widespread talk about education and children. But they do talk about that it's very important for particularly male children, but children in general, that they have time to roughhouse with their dad. And I have just one example I brought up from The Art of Manliness, which is a cool website. I've found fun stuff here a bunch of times. It talks about, this is about roughhousing. In the Gillette ad, there is this weird moment about roughhousing, and the men are on their grills. It's this line of men on their grills, kind of like Rey in The Last Jedi, where she's in that cave, and the darkness is just a bunch of her, because Rey's too cool to actually have a dark side. Whatever. And the kids roughhousing, and their guy comes in and he says, hey, knock that off. Knock off that roughhousing. Well, actually, Procter & Gamble, that is not what science says. Science says the complete opposite, in fact. In fact, it is, you should have let those kids roughhouse. The research that we have says that there are benefits from it. Here are just 6 benefits of roughhousing with your kids brings. Number 1, roughhousing with your kids makes them roughhousing with your kids makes your kids smarter. Psychologist Anthony Pellegrini has found that and the amount of roughhousing children engage in predicts their achievement in first grade better than kindergarten test scores do. Isn't that fascinating? So they say you look at tests from kindergarten, and what actually will better be a better predictor of those tests they take in kindergarten is how much time they get to roughhouse back at home. He says, as we discussed above, roughhousing makes your kid more resilient. Resilience is a key in children's intelligence. Resilient kids tend to see failure more as a challenge to overcome rather than an event that defines them. This sort of intellectual resilience helps ensure your children bounce from bad grades and gives them the grit to keep trying until they've mastered the topic. In addition to making students more resilient, roughhousing actually rewires the brain for learning. Neuroscientists have found that when they study animal and human brains, that bouts of rough and tumble play increase the brain's level of a chemical called a brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF. BDNF helps neuron growth in the parts of the brain responsible for memory, logic, and higher learning skills necessary for academic success. They say that it's not only that kind of intelligence, but it's many different kinds of intelligence, including social intelligence. Research shows, he goes in here, he talks about how people often have concerns that their 5-year-old wants to roughhouse at home with dad, and how wrong that is. And no, the science, again, is the opposite. Roughhousing is good. It actually makes people more socially intelligent. He says, Dr. Stuart Brown, an expert on play, says that, quote, the lack of experience with rough and tumble play hampers the normal give and take necessary for social mastery and has been linked with poor control of violent impulses later in life. That's right, wrestling your kid around in a play fight ensures they doesn't turn into the next Ted Bundy. Yeah, I love Art and Manliness. They're funny. And it could go into that. They talk about how roughhousing, they teach a kid between the difference between play and aggression. And I put this, it's more simple way to put it is, this teaches your kid boundaries. This teaches your kid how far they can go. Not only where their own physical boundaries are, but how far they can take themselves in a relationship. When is roughhousing too rough? When you were roughhousing with your brothers and you're wrestling on the ground, you come to a moment, I think, where you either bit or you push too hard or they couldn't breathe, and you realized, oh shoot, I went too far, I made a mistake. If you watch puppies play, and this, when I've raised puppies, you watch them as they kind of experiment with each other and they see how far they can go, and eventually one puppy gets too much of a bite, he goes, yip! And the other puppy's like, oh man, back off, usually, but not always, but usually they're like, oh, okay, we'll play this with something else. Time to take a break. And that's good. It teaches children lots of things. It teaches them about taking turns. It teaches kids about cooperating. Roughhousing is really great for kids. They talk about roughhousing teaches kids morality. Roughhousing teaches your kid about being physically active and enjoy being feeling active. And with men, and this is why I bring it back to the male relationships, roughhousing builds father-children bonds. This is one of those things that I have worried about if I ever am lucky enough in this life to have kids, was how am I going to fill this part? Because they say that roughhousing, for many people, they say their best moments of childhood was riding the horsey, which is basically saying playing roughhousing with dad, where dad carries you on his shoulders like you're a horse. You do like a old west horse thing. It's stuff like that. Roughhousing is tough, and I'm feeling kind of the pain from that right now. But after reading studies like this, it just tells me how important these simple things are in family life and how big of an impact they have at home. I think one of the sad side effects of our society, with now half of kids are born out of wedlock, and we're seeing so many single mothers raise their kids, is where many boys never get this. Many girls never get this, but particularly boys. That goes back to what I talked about masculinity being needed to being channeled. It does concern me. It does concern me. Here's the other thing I want to talk about. Let's see if I can find it, if it wants to play along with me here. I'll just reload the article. Okay, this is from A.P.A. Not one I go through to a lot, but it's another long-form website. This is a fantastic essay. I shared it with some family members of mine after I read it, and it moved them too. It's called The Marvel of the Human Dad. And it's amazing to me that at the same time the stuff from the A.P.A. and Gillete comes out, that this article comes out. That, I almost want to say that's not coincidence. It's amazing. It's amazing. He says, and I'll just read this first paragraph. Maybe I'll go on, maybe I won't. But this first paragraph pretty much gives you the basic idea. What separates us from our fellow apes is a question that, rightly or wrongly, distracts anthropologists periodically. Their discussions generally focus on language, tool use, creativity, and remarkable abilities to innovate, and it's certainly the case that 2 decades ago these answers would have been the top of the exclusively human list. But as our knowledge of the cognitive and behavioral abilities of our primate cousins increase, the dividing line between us and them becomes more blurred, being about the extent and complexity of, rather than the argument of, the presence or absence of a behavior. Take tool production. Chimps are adept at selecting and modifying grass stalks to use as fishing rods when dipping for termites, but their ability to innovate is limited, so there's no rapid forward momentum in tool development, as with the case with humans. But there is one aspect of human behavior that is unique to us, but is rarely the focus of these discussions. So necessary is this trait to the survival of our species that is underpinned by an extensive interrelated web of biological, psychological, and behavioral systems that evolved over past 500,000 years. Yet until 10 years ago, we had neglected to try to understand this trait, due to the misguided assumption that it was of no significance, indeed, that it was dispensable. This trait is human fatherhood. And the fact that it doesn't immediately spring to mind is symptomatic of the overwhelming neglect of this key figure in our society. This is so fantastic. I would recommend, if you're a parent, please, and if you're a dad in particular, please read it. It really is a beautiful essay. It's scientific. I like the essays which kind of mix the science with more contemporary English writing. If audio version would be like what Radiolab used to be before it got insanely political. Where it has this, it makes scientific subjects make more sense. It can put them more on the layman's level. And while I do have, my bachelor's is a Bachelor of Science, I can read many scientific studies. Trying to figure it out and make it make sense on paper and explain it simply isn't always easy. I think it's one thing to understand something, it's another to be able to explain it to others. And basically, what makes us different than the chimps, what makes us different than the apes, in a very important way, is men. Men in many animal species, they just leave the coop, they don't care. Often, sometimes we see with like lions, they'll eat the children. I mean, just crazy stuff. Men aren't always there and aren't acting as fathers. My dog, Jingle Bell, may rest in peace. He was actually, especially with the second litter of pups, he was actually a pretty active dad. But even so, what Jingle Bell did as a dad, it was hardly anything compared to what Snowbell, the mom, yes, I know, very creative names, did. I mean, she did all the work, basically, and when he would just play with them. But she did like everything. She fed them, cleaned them, took care of them. It was a lot of work. A lot of fun. I would love to talk about this subject another time. It's a great memory I have. But men, fatherhood is a rare trait. It is. It's a very rare trait. They talk about in this essay, fathers are so critical to the survival of our children and our species that evolution has not left their suitability for the role to chance. Like mothers, fathers have been shaped by evolution to be biologically, psychologically, and behaviorally primed to parent. We can no longer say that mothering is instinctive, yet fathering is learned. I'm getting all teary-eyed talking about this. I love my brother, his wife, and their kid very dearly. And I have been very impressed by them. I've been very impressed by James. And James and I didn't have much of a father figure growing up. How he is instinctively, he knows the needs of his daughter. He is very protective over her. He puts her as one of his top priorities all the time. I know from the father figures that kind of had to come and stand in line because of my own, family issues, that their example, though they were in my life limitedly, was important. I include my uncles and my grandpa in that, some family friends. And I won't share their names because I don't know if they want that to be known about them or not. But men that set a great example for me. Fatherhood can be a beautiful, beautiful, and wonderful thing that should not be discounted Fathers are very important in people's lives. They teach us, they guide us. Often they're the ones that can discipline, or if they're not, it's the mom. But they're an important part of the pair. They can teach us, instruct us. We follow their example. Often they're the ones with the dumb jokes and the silly time. They can lessen the drama, lessen the tension. One of my love things I did get from my dad is my love of science fiction, my love of Star Wars. And what things, positive experiences I have with my dad, I cherish. And I'm very grateful for. And I think as time has gone by, I've been able to better sort out the good from the bad and appreciate those good times. If you're someone that's a father, or you're expectant father, maybe you don't feel that you're doing enough, I would encourage you to try again. Be there for your kids, even if the kids don't seem to appreciate it very much. All the research says that men being more active in the raising of their children, the children have better outcomes. Better outcomes than what we can do with our schools, better outcomes than we can organize with our social engineering. Okay, the greatest social engineer of your child's future is mom and dad. And that's what the Gillete and the A.P.A. miss. It's this lie that eliminates the importance of proper manhood and the importance of having good men in children's lives. I think there's so many problems of today's society that could be solved if only families were on par to at least levels they were 50 years ago. That we would have more people being born in two-parent households, more people that knew both their parents, more parents that stayed married. I know there are nuances and reasons for a lot of this, and often they're abusive situation stuff. But to the extent now our society has, in the Western society, has kind of fallen apart when it comes to families. I think a lot of the social ills would be much less if families were strong. I know that was kind of a heavy segment. I know, I'm sorry. It's an important one. If I could get religious just a tiny bit, and my hero is Jonah Goldberg. He says never go to religion because you'll lose you'll lose a bunch of your audience because they're like, it's just God talk, it's just Jesus talk. I want to blow it off. You can't listen. So that's fair enough. I'm similar. I don't, I can appreciate religious. It doesn't bother me if religious talk is in an argument, but the argument itself has to be put upon principles of reason. That's the Enlightenment, baby. But if I would say, I really believe that Satan is behind this attack on manhood. I believe that he knows that the destruction of the family is the greatest thing he could do to harm, one of the greatest things he could do to harm man's happiness and man's freedom. People that are raised, and I don't have the science to prove it, but I would guarantee that people who are raised in a solid family foundation are more able to enjoy the blessings of freedom and to defend it. And that families that do break apart and kids that are more likely to come out of these households where they aren't raised with necessarily being taught how to channel their masculinity, and they're not being taught about standing on your own 2 feet, that they are less inclined to say that freedom is worth it. And I have a little bit, I was going to talk about the study that came from the Pew Research about the Generation Z. So if you are a man and you have a family of your own, or you want to have a family, I encourage it. Please be a dad. The pains are worth it. The joys of a family, of raising kids, of spending time with them are worth it. Even the male relationships I have with my siblings are very special to me, and I wouldn't trade them for anything. So I highly encourage you to be a dad. If you don't have kids, maybe you can mentor someone. Maybe you can mentor someone that doesn't have a dad. You can help show them a way. Show them what a good man looks like. Not all of us are blessed in this life to be dads. There are people that I love besides myself that have the same problem. Very good people who probably deserve a kid more than anyone else I know. But it just didn't happen. But I have been impressed by their example. And you know who you are. All right, well, let's go into another, I don't know, they're not commercial breaks. I don't know, we would call them little segues, musical segues, then I'll share some stupid stories, then I'll move back to some hard stuff, and away we go. All right, thank you. This has been the Happy Warrior Podcast, here with Peter Pischke. All right, there we go. My music today, Scott Holmes, I think, is most of it. The last two tracks were Scott Holmes. I get that from royaltyfreemusic.com or something. You can look it up. You just need to type in Scott Holmes, and I'll bring you to all that. Before I keep going, I would like to remind everyone, if you are listening to this, thank you. If you haven't followed me on the social medias, the Twitter, the Instagram, the Facebook, please do so. I got some YouTube videos up this week. We're trying to find a nice balance that can work with my health, and I apologize for not getting out as many as I hoped. I did get like 5 or 6 out, so that's something. I mean, it's better than nothing, but we'll keep working at that. A bunch of us are just kind of struggling with the winter depression, the humdrums. I apologize for that. I tried to make this episode a little bit more positive. So I got some feedback. Maybe my last one was too negative. I thought that my last episode was great, but whatever. Try to take the criticism as best you can and learn from it. All right, well, let's move to some stupid stories. So first, well, I don't know if this is stupid. This is sad. Boo, the world's cutest dog, has died. Yes, Boo. He was 12 years old. Boo, the world's cutest dog. You've probably seen him on Instagram or Facebook, Pinterest, or everywhere. He first gained a massive following on his Facebook page over the last decade. They think that as of now, his page has more than 16 million likes and follows. And he is the subject of several books and other merchandise. Poor guy. Yes, it is with deepest sadness I wanted to share that Boo passed away in his sleep early this morning and has left us to join his best friend Buddy. We know that Buddy was first to greet him on the other side of that rainbow bridge, and this is likely the most excited neither of them has been in a long time. Oh, what is Boo? I think Boo is a Pomeranian. Just like the way they cut their hair is very interesting. Buddy's a Pomeranian. If Buddy's his brother, then Boo must be a Pomeranian. He says, like humans, Boo started having heart issues after his brother died. We think his heart literally broke when Buddy left us. It's so sad. That was not positive. You know what's also not sad? Is mini pigs. And I read this story and I've had the word mini pig stuck in my head. So I've been singing little ditties like mini pig, yeah, the mini pig, mini pig, mini pig. You know, I got mini pigs stuck in my head. So a couple of years ago, there was this mini pig craze. I was seeing them a bunch of TV movies, Christmas movies. The Instagram celebrities had them. They were just kind of everywhere. Mini pigs. Mini pigs are a lie. Or at least, yeah, they are a lie. Or there's nuance to it, but basically they're a lie. Pigs do not stay at 20 pounds. There is not a pig naturally that does it. As of now, maybe genetic engineering will solve that. But until then, they do not. A healthy mini pig goes from anywhere from 75 to 150 pounds. So, and there's this article from Fox News. It's called "Mini Pigs Become Growing Problem as Animal Shelters Become Inundated with Overgrown Swine." And it starts this terrible story about this lady who had a kid that wanted a mini pig, paid $2,500, and they took care of the pig for 3 years. It grew to 200 pounds, and then they weren't allowed to have it anymore because it got too big. And I want to say, what was it? Massachusetts took it away from them. Now, I imagine Massachusetts is a pretty steep domestic animal loss. Yeah, and they had the director of the adoptions at the Massachusetts SPCA say they have been inundated with calls from pig owners who say they do not have enough room for a full-size pig. They say in the past 5 years they've taken in 96 unwanted pigs. And this is a problem across the country. And they're, even now, Pig Advocates League with pig sanctuaries have taken in hundreds of unwanted full-size pot-bellied pigs over the last few years. Part of this is scam. They think the Murray family was scammed because, like, they can't find the person that bred it. Their phone number no longer works. You know, because you get a piglet, how are you going to know this is a mini pig or if it's going to grow into a full-size pig? And it seems the line between full-size pig and mini pig is kind of low. And people, when they bought mini pig, did not read the fine print that says mini pigs may grow up to 150 pounds. It's going to be a big dang animal. I mean, it's not going to be like a full-size hog from at a farm or anything, but it's 150 pounds is pretty big. Our husky's like 75. That's a big dog. You know, when he stands on his hind legs, he's like almost 5 feet something. Just big dog. Think about how big a pig is, 150. 200 pig. Oh, it's so sad. Poor mini pigs. Poor mini pigs. And it gets really sad. The person they were talking to really waxed eloquent about mini pigs. They talk about they have emotional intelligence, they have feelings, they become very attached to their feelings. So when they lose their family, they don't understand why, and they grieve their loss. I've had pigs come here that have actually cried. The mini pigs. Again, of course, there is American Mini Pig Association who feel that this is. I don't want to get into it. It's a whole thing. They're like, look, we're a real organization, and we require our breeders to meet certain standards, and that they need to let people know that terms like micro, nano, and teacup are deceptive marketing tactics. Some people are even starving pigs, breeders. Some of these fake breeders online are starving pigs with like a quarter of a cup of food a day so they'll stay small little piglets, which is terrible. That's just all terrible. Human beings are terrible, let me tell you. Human beings can be awful. The thing, kind of interesting, National Geographic pointed out that since 1998, the number of mini pigs in the United States they think could be as high as 1 million. Just, wow. That's crazy. I think the other crazy news I kind of wanted to share was all these stories that came out recently about UFOs and how you may or may not believe that UFOs are real and that aliens are real, but the U.S. government does. They paid an awful lot of money for it, and we have top, what is the term I'm looking for? Astronomers? Yes, top astronomers at the University of Hawaii who say that they're real as well. So the two stories I have for you, one from Motherboard. The government's secret UFO program funded research on wormholes and extra dimensions. These released recently by the Department of Defense. The documents reveal some of its infamous advanced aerospace threat identification program it's been working on. And I talked about, maybe I didn't, I don't know. It was last year, so the end of 2017, so over a year ago. There was more documents got released that basically there are a bunch of people in the U.S. government who believe that aliens are real, and there are a couple of weird materials they found. They find weird objects they think can't be possibly natural. They must be, I wouldn't use the word man-made, but you know, they're artificial. And that's what this guy says. It's this astronomist, Avi Loeb, who is the chair of Harvard's astronomy department, co-wrote a paper with Harvard postdoctoral fellow Shmuel Bialy that examined this meteor or asteroid, whatever, called Oumuamua, because it had a peculiar acceleration and suggested the object may be a fully operational probe sent intentionally to Earth's vicinity by alien civilization. So basically the argument is, look, based on the size of this thing, based on the times it accelerated and deaccelerated, there's no way this thing could just be a flying rock. That's basically the sum of it. You could get, if you want, I have a link to it in the New Yorker, if you want to look into things, because there's a bunch of weird things about it. Like, they say, like, the factor of its brightness for an object of its size is way too big. They say its brightness varies by a factor of 10 as it spins, meaning that it's at least 10 times longer than it is wide. We don't have a photo, but in the artist's illustrations you have seen in the web, it looks like a cigar. That's one possibility. But it's also possible it's a pancake-like geometry. In fact, that is favored. They say this is important because this doesn't typically happen naturally because of the way comets move. It's crazy. It's really interesting. So I thought I'd just point that out. If we find out that Muamua was indeed an alien probe and we're all going to die, you just know that you heard it here first. I don't know what else to do with that. There's like, if it is, there's nothing I can do about it. We're just at the mercy of a Muamua. Whatever a Muamua wants to do to us, we'll just have to let it. And it's too bad. Hopefully they have a weakness to colds. A la Orson Welles. So one of the things that have always bothered me is call-out culture. Call-out culture is awful. Call-out culture is social justice mob mentality, where we castigate and attack someone for doing something we think horrible or just being mean, and it's only based on very little facts where you get less than half of a story. And call-out culture is even worse, and these days it is because the media, the people who are supposed to do the job of siphoning out the facts and figure out what is the truth from what is false, finding out the real narrative instead of the wanted narrative, instead of the desired narrative, the people that are involved in the story. You know, you want truth over manipulation. Okay, you want justice instead of social justice. You want justice based on facts and evidence. And you want people involved in the story to get due process and their day in court. Call-out culture is the antithesis to all of that. That is why call-out culture is wrong. And all of us, even conservatives, have fallen into it. And we continually fall into it and fall flat on our philosophical and intellectual faces. And it's embarrassing. And the greatest example of this, just a great, perfect example, is this embarrassing story over the weekend that even in my home state, they've all fallen for. And my friends, Joe Sneeve, who's a great reporter here in my hometown, here in South Dakota, basically, when people are like, isn't this terrible what they're doing? He says, hold on, guys. Let's wait till we get all the facts. These stories often aren't what they appear to be. And lo and behold, less than 12 hours later, when he posted that last night, he's right. And I agree with him. I felt like this is a story that needed time, but that we find out the truth, because these things are rarely what they appear. So I don't even need to tell you hardly about this, but basically, the kids with the MAGA hats are the Native American guy, right? What you have been sold is a pack of lies. And even some people, the New York Times just came out and says, whoops, we screwed it up, people, our bad. The narrative was this. Mean MAGA kids surround and confront a Native American gentleman who is just trying to do a Native American protest song. And they're jeering him, and you have this one guy who stares at him and is smiling with this kind of smirk. And basically the narrative had this premise was the boys are racist. This is Trump's evil America. These are evil MAGA boys. This is toxic masculinity at its finest. As of right now, there are way more articles with that narrative and premise that haven't been corrected than there are ones that have. Because there seems to be very little incentive these days for journalists to actually be honest and to admit their errors and fix it. Here is the truth of the matter. There were indeed actually three groups. There was the Native American protesters, and really it was just the one Native American protester, and then he has like some Native American guys next to him. It was these MAGA students who were from an all-male school called Covington. And it was this black nationalist, also pretty racist group named the Black Hebrew Israelites. And there's a video of these people doing this thing where they're having this ceremony. It's a weird, I don't know, sermon. And they start yelling racial slurs and homosexual slurs, the F word, at these MAGA people. Well, the MAGA people then get up and says, what's your problem? Why, And it just became this thing where they're jeering at each other. Well, in the middle of this, and we're not sure yet if the Native American man was with the Black Hebrew Israelites, because they make a comment here with the Black Hebrew Israelites, make something like, our elder's here to, save us, he's helping us, something to that extent. Nathan Phillips is the name of the man, by the way, of the Native American man. He does starts to do this protest march in the middle of this group, jeering at each other. And he comes up and basically gets in the face and in the personal space of the MAGA group. Now, I'm not justifying that the boys were perfect here. They weren't. Okay, these were bored boys who were waiting for their school bus to pick them up. They were told by oh, what's the word I'm looking for? Anyhow, the instructor to wait there. I'm sure the word will come to me later. And it took, 2 hours for it to happen, and the boys are there, and this black Afro-nationalist group gets up, and they do their thing, starts yelling racial slurs at them, and they're coming like, hey, man, hey, and they're taking videos of each other, on and on and on. There are no heroes in this story, by the way, but there are only a few clear villains. And it's not the MAGA crowd. Okay, if anything, the clear villains are the black Hebrew Israel, whatever they call themselves. Black Hebrew Israelites. It just got chaotic. And so if you watch the live stream, and it's a 2-hour live stream, you watch this guy, he gets up in the face of this kid. Now, see, with that clip we first saw, it kind of makes it look like the kid got on the Mr. Phillips' face and was mocking while he was doing the war drumming and the chanting, whatever you want to call it. I don't know all the right terminology at this moment. Forgive me. And the kid had that weird smirk. But as it still is right now, in fact, the people that have written for Covington that were there have written that they didn't mean disrespect. At least this particular boy didn't. And that the group there was confused as what the heck was going on. Because one second they have these black Afro-nationalists yelling at them, saying the worst awful things. And then there's this native guy starting doing his chanting. And they're like, what is going on? They didn't know if he was on their side. They didn't know if he was making fun of them. They did not know what to do. These are kids that are young high school kids. And I think what made this story so easy to sell to the media was the MAGA hats and the fact that they're young white men. And even some people, there was this one guy, Reza Aslan, who's a guy someone I look up to, as he's on the left, but he's a guy that's tried to be honest in the past, has tried to bridge the divide between left and right culturally. And even he says, this guy has the most, punchable face I've ever seen, or some stupid tweet like that. Just really, people who should know better fell flat on their face and bought the original narrative that was being sold by the black Hebrew Israelites. They're the ones that sold the video that all the news stations have been using. They're the ones that wrote the original narrative about Nathan Phillips being tormented and abused by the young men. Now, does that mean the boys were perfect? No. If we talk about toxic masculinity, there was a little bit of that on the MAGA side, because these boys, they're young men, they get excited, they get bored, they do stupid things. It's been true of young men put together in a big group and left alone by themselves. That will happen every time in some way. But were they wickedly awful? Were they mocking him? Were they being as awful as we are all claiming? No. That's the truth of the matter. I don't even want to talk about this frickin' subject, but, it seems so hard to get the truth of the matter out there. Color culture is awful because no one goes back. And if a newspaper makes a mistake, do they say, hey, we screwed up, our bad, and they put that at the top of the page of the article where it was online? No. Do they lead in their paper where they made the mistakes? No, they hide them in the back. People don't want to admit when they're wrong. And there's no incentive right now to admit you're wrong. Because right now we're just, there's lots of reasons for this. One of the reasons is because journalists have to get a ridiculous amount of content is expected of them to get out. And so there's not incentive to make content quality if you have to get out a lot of it. Not everyone is true of this, and I kind of like the independent journalist publications more. Tim Pool, who's a YouTuber that I've been watching lately, he's one of these guys that has an incentive to get it right, and I like that. But with our major media and the people that actually have some power in the media sphere, they just didn't try. They really didn't, and they just fell flat on their faces to do it. So here's another example that I hate, and it's kind of gone around. It's this, so call-out culture, another part of call-out culture, is about abuser spreadsheets. And the Me Too movement had this a couple of times where there would be these lists sent anonymously of men that apparently were awful. I shared that story with Robert about that kid who killed himself after he was put on one of these lists and shamed publicly at a women's march. By his girlfriend, no less. Well, one of these has popped up now. It's called my article goes to Kotaku, and since this thing initially was posted, they've tried to clear it up some more and put some more nuance in it, so I'll give them credit for that. But as spreadsheet of accused abusers spreads, anime conventions get their Me Too movement. And I say with the nuance they've added, it's a lot less awful than it first was. But basically, it's these people they say these such and such hurt me and was mean or sexist or rude or whatever on the spreadsheet. And we don't know who it comes from. And it's just left there out the wind, and somehow this is okay. And then people take the information, they dox the men, they ruin their lives, they prevent them from getting jobs. Sometimes it can lead to really nasty things. Where you get swatted. That's where they call law enforcement on you, and often a SWAT team will come in, and they don't know, they were just told information anonymously about this person that has a bomb threatens to hurt themselves or others. And just awful things. These anonymous lists are not justice; they are social justice via the mob. And this kind of stuff is too common. Another example is the Media Men list. This was in 2018, in the height of the Me Too movement. Same thing. We put these people anonymously. But here's the truth of it. And the article ironically admits in here, one of these guys that says, well, I have lots of people I know at these conventions that can say how wonderful of a guy you are. But what happens if you're not popular? What happens if you're, like me, you don't have too many social connections? Maybe you're new to the convention scene, and this just gets slammed at you. Maybe it's an ex-girlfriend like that guy from the Nerdist had to face. And by the way, he never got never got basically the company he founded. He never got to be let back in. Just ridiculous garbage. There's no justice, and there's no way to prove yourself that you're innocent. In court of law, you get your day in court of law, and you get to confront your accuser, you get to stand up, you get to ask for evidence, you get to examine the witnesses, you get to show if you're innocent. You get to prove that, or at least prove to the extension that, it's bigger. Sorry, there's enough doubt there that it's bigger than the thought of you being guilty. Whatever. I can't talk right now. I apologize. You don't get that with call-out culture. Call-out culture doesn't like it. That just, you're killing our groove here, man. Why do you have a problem with it? Why do you want to say this is a problem? I'll give Cecilia D'Antozia points that she did try to fix it, and she did add to it, and it does have the nuance that I would expect of a journalist to try to add. But it is emblematic. It is an example of the problem. Another example, I've talked about comedians who aren't allowed to perform. There was one recently about this white gender fluid comedian that said he couldn't perform because he had dreadlocks. And basically, it's this is people ignorance. So ignorance meets woke is dreadlocks. There's this idea right now that dreadlocks are an African thing only. This is not true. Any culture that has ever had hair has had dreadlocks. Because people with long hair obviously gets matted. There are many cultures that like it more than others, but you go far enough back in any culture, you'll find matted hair. You'll find locks. I have Nordic ancestry. I'm German ancestry. I'm a European cocktail of ancestry. But I had ancestors that had dreadlocks. Now, if I have dreadlocks, I grow dreadlocks, cultural appropriation, technically, no, it's not, because no one has claims to dreadlocks, because dreadlocks were in every culture. It's just ridiculous. But, of course, he wasn't allowed to perform. He was like, no, you can't be here. And what's so funny, and that's what made me wonder if this is even a real story first, was because the comedy club that said he couldn't perform was the Snowflake Comedy Club. Oh, that's painful. Yeah, the comedian is Zach Poitras. I think that's his name. Or Poitras. And yeah, they said you can't do it because you got the locks. It's cultural appropriation. And I mean, these are some examples of cultural appropriation. There's a story. Here's another article if you're listening by David Brooks. I don't always agree with David Brooks. He's an excellent interviewer, by the way. David Brooks is a talented interviewer. I don't agree with his politics, but he has this amazing opinion article from January 14th in the New York Times called The Cruelty of Cult Culture. And it's awesome. It is Schadenfreude to the max. It's basically, I listened to a podcast called Invisibilia. It's a Radiolab spin-off series, and it talks in that episode about this punk core rocker, and I've heard this one. And basically in this, there was this guy she didn't like, and she called him out for being awful, and he was kicked out. Fast forward in the future, in this episode, she gets called out and kicked out because in the past she did something that went viral. She was like mean in high school, and she maybe posted a nude photo of a female student or had a emoji making fun of the girl. something you could call cyberbullying. Well, then she got called out and pushed away from the punk scene. And now she says, what do I do? Punk was my life. Quote, it's entirely my life. Like, this is everything to me, and it's all just, like, done and over. But as David Brooks says, but she accepted the legitimacy of the call-out process. If she was called out, it must mean she deserved to be rendered into a non-person. I don't know what to think of myself other than, like, I'm so sorry, and I do feel like a monster. And it's fantastic. I don't always like Invisibilia, but this is a great episode. And it's a great article where he talks about that, look, call-out culture, there is no justice, and there is no way to prove that it's wrong. And that is why call-out culture is wrong. Call-out culture is the mob. Look, the mob is tantalizing. The mob is exciting. Okay, we want to go to the mob because the mob is interesting and exciting and seems like you're getting what you want right now and you're fixing injustice right now because justice takes too dang long and there are courts and there are lawyers and there are questions and doubts and it's just hard. But call-out lists and anonymous tweets about this awful person, easy. And that is the problem with call-out culture. Call-out culture is wrong because it is so easy. It's too easy to ruin people's lives. And it's wrong if you do it to man or woman. It might even be wrong if the person is guilty. You know, one of the sad things about the Me Too movement is, you know, tens of thousands of people have been called out online, but very, very few of them have ever received justice. Very, very few of them. Most of it, they never go to court. And the reason why the Me Too movement, I think, is pittered out a lot is because it's burned so many people, because they haven't sought justice, because they haven't sought doing the hard thing, and because we've called out everyone every which way, particularly men, that it's burned everyone. There was a survey that came out last year, October 15th, 2018, from The Economist, and it says, after a year of hashtag Me Too, American opinion has shifted against victims. Survey responds have become more skeptical about sexual harassment. And it's not just men. Men and women equally are now bothered by the Me Too. It's fantastic. Basically, all of Americans have just become tired of these collective action movements. They've become tired of the call-out culture, and that's happy to me. But then I see things that happen this weekend. I'm like, I don't know. Maybe the normal American, the layperson is tired of call-out culture, but I don't think our media are. I think they enjoy it still, and I hope that pendulum swings back awfully soon because I am very, very tired of it. All right, well, let's take a break, come back, do a little bit more fun, one more hard news segment, and call it a day. Thank you. This is the Happy Warrior Podcast with your friend, Happy Warrior Pete. Alright, I am back. That is Lobo Loco, the Glue Worm Evening Blues. I thought I'd do something kind of different, get you in the mood. That seems very like an NPR sound break. Brought to you by the American Science Foundation. And for viewers like you. That kind of thing. Good to be here back with you. Happy Warrior Pete. That is I. I have all kinds of ancestry, including British and Scottish and Welsh and all the good stuff. And I found this fun list from Mental Floss, which is 50 old British dialect words we should bring back. And I agree completely with this list. You know, I am an aptycock man, which is a quicker-witted or intelligent young man. At least I think so. I'm trying to be someone that doesn't get too big for their britches or get too clump for their shoes. Clump, of course, means to walk in shoes that are too large for your feet. This podcast, I try to make it not crumbo clink, but or crinky winky, which is a groundless misgiving or poor reason for not doing something. Crumbo clink is a word for poor quality poetry. I hope when you listen to this, you aren't in the middle of a crackle in any awkward or difficult situation. And I hope this doesn't make you feel crumpsy, which is a short-tempered and irritable person, probably a variation of grumpy. Yes, maybe you might be drinking a Cuddle Me Buff, which is another word for a beer. And perhaps if you're listening to this, you might get a little tipsy and fall over and doopscood, which is a heavy fall on the buttocks. That's a Scottish word. In fact, there are a lot of Scottish words in here that I've enjoyed. Flench. When the weather looks like it's going to improve, but it never does, then it's flenched. Or what about the word, what's another good? You get this sometimes after walking. If you're in Scotland and you have to go up and down those hills and mountains, you might say, "Oh, I'm feeling quite handspur," which is pain and stiffness felt in the legs after a long walk. And there's all kinds of fun one. I love this. It's fantastic. If maybe you've had this problem, this is kind of a Yorkshire word. Okay, razzle, to cook something so that the outside of it burns, but the inside of it stays raw. You can also razzle yourself by warming yourself by a fire. Oh, I've had that. That's awful when you cook something and in the middle of it's raw. It's awful. Let's find one more. Let's find another good one. Okay, how about this? Have you ever felt this way? Maybe you felt zwatered. Zwater. Yes, it's from southwest England. It means, and this is interestingly enough the last entry in the English dialect dictionary. It says, a drowsy, stupid state of body or mind. Yes, and it's related to the word swatter, which means to grow weary with drinking. Zwater. I'm feeling quite zwater today. Yes. So interestingly enough, a big study came out. It's from the Pew Research Center. They've kind of studied American generations from when they're born and their youths and looked at their differing attitudes. And they recently moved from primarily millennials to Generation Z. Millennials are people, and this is a pretty long room. It's like 1981. So if you're born 1981 until 1996, you're a millennial. So this is my three brothers. So I'm 89, they're 91 and 95. But my sister, who's born 98, is part of Generation Z. And I think this study actually kind of helps me understand her just a little better. And it's a very interesting study. I kind of wanted to talk a little bit about it because there are people on the left and right that have been trying to use it to say good and bad things. And I think there's some accuracy in some parts and seem less than honest appeals. So first, I have to say that for the left, they're more accurate on this than the right have been. Because Generation Z, though they are more conservative than millennials, it isn't by much. And when they say in the Washington Post, education failure, Generation Z following millennial footsteps to big government, yeah, that is true. If all your problems with millennials, Generation Z has pretty much still got them, just a little bit less, like a dash less, like 1% less. In many of these categories, it is 1% less. Part of this from the Pew Research Center, I go to the part that says, Generation Z looks a lot like millennials on key social and political issues. They say Gen Z and millennials differ from older generations in views on Trump, role of government, and growing diversity in the U.S. And if you look at it, you say that approve of Trump's job performance, millennials 29%, Gen Z 30%. So Gen Z likes Trump just a dash more. Government should do more to solve problems. Millennials are 64%, Gen Z is 70%. Can you think about that? 70% of Generation Z feel that government should solve our problems. And more of Gen Z thinks that racial and ethnic diversity is good for society. And I don't know, that one's weird because like how the way that's said right there, like who's going to say it isn't? Now, I'm a person that's say more neutral, where like, yes, I think diversity of thought, diversity of ideas is good. I think we should all hold to, a big American culture. But I think, if you want to go a little Tokyo, you want to go to you want to go to Harlem, you want to, try these little different cultures inside the big system, I think it's fine to an extent. Again, there's nuance on this. I think as long as we all cling to, the melting pot and the big American idea of freedom, enlightenment, capitalism in as in free enterprise, not as in corporations and big companies making deals for each other. It's interesting. It says, roughly a third of Gen Zers know someone who uses gender-neutral pronouns. And this is even bigger than millennials. Millennials are 25% say they're for gender-neutral pronouns. But Gen Z say they know, 35% say they know someone that does this. And what's interesting is even the Gen Z that says they're Republican on a bunch of issues, they are more like Democrats. They are more comfortable with big government solutions. And they are less likely to believe that climate change isn't just something that happens. It's not cyclical. Instead, they believe that it's man-made by quite a big margin. They look at, say, Gen Z Republicans more likely than other Republicans to say blacks aren't treated fairly. And you look at it, it says Gen Z, 43% Republicans think this, versus millennials, 30%. For Democrats, it's the same, 82-82. Gen X is only 23, and Boomer and Silent are at 20. And there's a bunch of things like this that are about politics. The page that goes to this, I would recommend if you would like a little bit more insight. Now, some Republicans are deluding themselves. They're saying, well, once these people pay taxes and they're part of a society, they'll just become normal conservatives. This used to be true, but one of the things the Republicans have preached on for many decades now, and have been successful, is that very few people actually pay taxes. In fact, a little less than half of this country pays taxes. Mitt Romney, remember, got in trouble for saying this, but on principle and functionally, he was right. Half the country does not pay anything in taxes. In fact, they often have a net benefit. And it's hard for people to feel like government is intruding in your life and taking money from your paycheck when they aren't. This is one of the mistakes Republicans have made in a number of ways. Now, I'm for low taxes, but I also want, flat tax. Everybody should have to pay taxes. Everyone should feel like they have, a part in the system. We should all feel like we have some money on this thing. And we all need to feel like it's important that we make the society work, that government functions and is efficient because we've all put money into it. I think that Republicans on this idea, and you can see this even in the last Trump tax bill, is this mistake where we've reduced low-income families and a lot of middle-income families from having to pay hardly any taxes at all. Now, I want small government. I want almost libertarian laissez-faire kind of a free enterprise capitalist system. I want the tax burden on everyone to be much less at all levels, not just the direct taxes, but taxes that are caused through regulation and taxes that are caused by affecting sources of manufacturing or goods or just natural resources. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that you can create taxes, functionally speaking. But, Gen Z does not have a problem with the government solving our problems. And this is saddening to me because for a while now, conservatives have been saying, well, Gen Z the pendulum will swing back. We'll be at millennials, and then we'll go to Gen Z, and Gen Z will be more conservative, and they'll be part of our saving hope. And the study here does not point to that. They say, yeah, Gen Z is a little bit more conservative on some issues, but generally speaking, they're not. And when they are, it's very little. It is very little at all. And Gen Z and millennials have very similar feelings about families, about same-sex marriage, on and on and on. I mean, it's a very interesting thing. I mean, Gen Z, for example, says, and here's one that kind of goes across to what we talked about earlier. Two things. First, most generations are indifferent about cohabitation but have a more negative view of single motherhood. 20% of Gen Z think cohabitation is good. 67% doesn't make a difference. 12% say it's a bad thing. Go to single motherhood, which is saying single mothers raising children on their own is bad for our society. Gen Z says 15, they agree with this. 49 don't think it makes a difference. 39 disagree. more Gen Z disagrees than agrees that single parenthood is bad for society. And this is even, I don't get a lot of hope from this study. Like, majority of the one of the things that still holds true about Gen Z is they think both parents and households should share financial responsibilities. It goes on and on. There are many similar things that they are to the previous generation of Americans in general. And I think it's a study that's worth looking after. And it'll be interesting as future studies come out that look at this group of individuals to see if they change over time or not. I just don't believe it. I want to believe it. I want to believe that Gen Z will be more conservative. But how would they become more conservative? How? Well, one way that probably is true is they've seen the insanity of the millennial generation, examples being call it culture, the Me Too movement. Okay, that might do it. But they still imbibe the same education, they still imbibe the same media and entertainment and news, and they still imbibe the same familial values that our society is losing. And so in all those ways, they're essentially drinking from the same fountain the millennials are. And that's why I don't think on most of these things you don't see much difference. And Gen Z, in one way that they drastically different from the millennials, is that they say 6 in 10 Gen Zers say forums should offer other gender options. They've bought into the transgender claims. And I don't know. I don't know what to make about it more than that. It's very interesting. Gen Z, some interesting things. This isn't in the Pew Research, but Gen Z also have a different view on social media, and this is bad for Facebook. Facebook got embarrassed this week because they're making a meme app for teens and tweens called LOL, and insiders that saw it and talked to newspapers say it was cringe-inducing and the content on it was weeks old. And it's the reason why Facebook is worried is because Gen Z pushes away from social media. This is one thing they do differ than millennials and other generations. They push back against Facebook. They just don't like it. They don't like social media. They don't buy into it. They disagree pretty strongly. This article says there are a bunch of other brands that could be hurt by this by Gen Z, including department stores, preppy brands, cable TV, anything related to paper. Pandora's on the list. That's very interesting. Luxury goods, Crocs. Oh, those are some kind of luxury shoe, I guess. I don't know. Casual dining restaurants. I don't know if I buy into all these extra claims. But the social media one is based on statistics and even Facebook's own internal dialogue. I don't know. Yeah. Poor Facebook. I don't know what they're going to do. So, all this stuff, I'll land here with a big picture item. Last week, Beto O'Rourke, who I'm not a fan of because he's a quasi-socialist that, plays on people's ignorance and just their desire for a good-looking guy. I could go more into this, but basically, he plays an image. They like the image. They don't really understand what he's actually selling, his bill of goods. He does this more so to the even extent that AOC does, because AOC is very upfront about what she wants. She's pretty much is raging. I'm a socialist. We have to have the 70% rate. We have to have Green New Deal. Blah 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 blah. But Beto O'Rourke is more smooth. It's just out there and is exact. And he came out with this thing where he was pandering around. Says, well, do our constitutional values really matter anymore? He's basically saying we don't need the Constitution because the document is too old. In fact, I'll just read the quote so I get this accurate for all of you at home. Quote, does this still work? Can an empire like ours, with military presence in over 170 countries around the globe, with trading relationships and security agreements in every continent, can it still be managed by the same principles that were set down 230 plus years ago? I would like to point out these are principles. Not just that the founding document, but the principles behind the founding document. Now, he has like a punk socialist background. Beto O'Rourke is a true believer in his defense. But it does bother me. And I think Beto O'Rourke, part of his popularity is because of the millennials, Generation Z, and on down probably have less of a value of the Constitution. And I think if I had to read the tea leaves as of this moment, I see the future going more towards Beto O'Rourke. I was listening to some folks who are not on the right, by the way, they're on the left, that could see a future in which the American empire kind of ends and we move into a new system. I don't know. I mean, I'm not saying I like the idea of the American empire. I'm not a nativist. I think that America should keep its deals and should protect countries that want to be free. But this idea that we're going to leave our constitutional society and system does bother me. And if things continue on this trend and the Gen Z and the millennials don't imbibe some freedom and enlightenment values, we're headed that way. So that was a happy note to end this episode of the Happy Warrior podcast. Sorry for being a big Debbie Downer. It's just I have to tell the truth. Robert and I were trying to think of ways to make it more positive. I think my opening segment was pretty dang positive. I think my fun segments were relatively positive. But here I end at this Debbie Downer of a day. This has been the Happy Warrior podcast. Please, if you haven't followed us yet, follow us on Instagram, Twitter. We now have a YouTube channel, which is just Happy Warrior. Not Happy Warrior Podcast, but just Happy Warrior. What else? Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, yep. Also, email pete@happy-warrior.net. Remember all those. I would love to hear from you. I love to hear your ideas. It makes it easier to put segments together if I know what you guys want to learn about, and what ideas and principles and theories you would like me to opine on. Thank you to Robert Mehling, my producer, partner, and friend, for help producing this podcast and being a shoulder to cry on. Thank you to those that provide feedback and have been listening. I appreciate it a lot. Right now is a tough time for a lot of us, and your prayers and thoughts and comments do mean a lot. Please continue to support us. We are trying. We really do believe in this country. I believe in Beto O'Rourke doesn't, but I believe in the principles behind this great country. Have we always lived up to those principles? No. But have we tried? Have we held up the ideal of meeting those principles and fulfilling them? Those founding principles of life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, right to due process. Yes. And it'd be a dark, dark day in this world's history when we abandon those principles. And the world will be so much worse off when we do. So here's hoping, if you have kids that are Gen Z, maybe talk a little bit about the greatness of the Scottish Enlightenment, the United States Constitution. Huh? Yeah, maybe. Think about it. Okay. All right. Well, thank you so much for listening. You guys have been great. Until next time, this has been the Happy Warrior Podcast.
Thank you for listening. The Happy Warrior Podcast, hosted by Peter Vaughn Pischke, produced by Robert Mehling, a production of the Sioux Empire Podcast Network. Learn more at happy-warrior.net. 僕らは出会うだろう同じ鼓動の音を目印にしてここにいるよいつだって飛んでるからくたびれた理由が重なって揺れる時生まれた意味を知る存在が続く限り
A production of the SiouxEmpire.com